You didn't leave, you were released. And you've never been able to fully explain that to anyone, not your family, not your closest friend, not even to yourself in those quiet moments when you replay the decision like a film reel you can't stop. You walked away from something, a relationship, a job, a friendship, a version of yourself you'd been trying to hold together with bare hands. And the moment you made that choice, something in the room shifted. Something in the air changed. Something in your chest, something you hadn't felt in a very long time, exhaled. But then the doubt came, and it came hard, because walking away never looks the way movies promise it will. There was no dramatic orchestral swell. There was no slow motion scene of you leaving while everyone watched in quiet admiration. Instead, there were questions. There were voices, some external, some from inside your own mind, that told you that you made a mistake, that you gave up too soon, that you were being selfish, that you would regret it, that people who are serious about life don't quit, that people who are faithful stay, that strong people hold on. What no one told you, and what heaven has been trying to show you ever since, is that sometimes the most spiritually advanced thing a chosen one can do is know when to release their grip. You sensed this before anyone told you. That's why you're still sitting with it. That's why this video found you today, at this exact moment, in this exact season of your life. Not by accident, not by coincidence. The universe has a way of sending the right message to the right person at the right time, and whatever brought you here today, that is the part of this you need to pay attention to. Because what you're about to discover about your decision to walk away is going to permanently reframe everything you thought you lost. Let's start with what you've never been able to say out loud. Something inside you knew long before you made the decision that you were staying somewhere you no longer belonged. You felt it in your body first, a heaviness that no amount of sleep could fix, a background noise of wrongness that followed you through your days like a shadow that wouldn't obey the angle of light. You would wake up in the morning, and for just 1 second before full consciousness arrived, you would feel fine. And then reality would settle back in, and you would feel the weight of something that no longer fit your life pressing down on your chest. But you stayed. Because that is what chosen ones do before they understand what they are. They endure, they sacrifice. They convince themselves that the pain is proof of their loyalty, that the discomfort is just the cost of commitment, that if they can just hold on a little longer, something will shift. You tried everything, didn't you? You tried communicating differently. You tried praying harder. You tried showing up more consistently. You tried adjusting your expectations. You tried making yourself smaller so that the situation could feel larger. You tried being the reason things worked, the glue that held everything together, the person who absorbed the most pressure so that others didn't have to feel it. And still something whispered, "This is not where you are supposed to be." That whisper is what this is really about. Because that whisper didn't come from fear. It didn't come from laziness. It didn't come from weakness or immaturity or the inability to commit. That whisper came from the most spiritually attuned part of who you are, the part of you that operates on a frequency that most people will never access. The part that can sense seasons changing before the temperature drops. The part that knows, without logic or evidence, when something has run its full course. And you fought that whisper for a long time, because that is also what chosen ones do. They question themselves before they trust themselves. Here is the first thing you need to understand about walking away, and this is something that most people in your life will never be equipped to grasp. There are two kinds of holding on. There is the kind that comes from strength, from covenant, from a place of genuine love and spiritual alignment. And then there is the kind that comes from fear. The fear of what people will say, the fear of starting over, the fear that if you leave this thing that was making you bleed, there will be nothing waiting on the other side. Most people confuse these two things their entire lives. They call fear-based endurance loyalty. They call survival faithfulness. They wear the weight they've been carrying as evidence of their character, not recognizing that heaven never asked them to carry it in the first place. But you, somewhere deep in that quiet place inside you that operates beneath all the noise, you knew the difference. You felt the difference. And when you finally made the decision to walk away, it wasn't because you gave up. It was because you finally gave yourself permission to listen to what had been trying to speak to you for months, maybe years. This is what others could not understand. From the outside, your decision looked like surrender. It looked like instability. It looked like someone who couldn't handle difficulty, couldn't maintain consistency, couldn't honor their commitments. They didn't have access to what you had access to. They couldn't feel what you felt. They couldn't hear what you were hearing in the quiet. They were watching the surface of your life and making judgments about a depth they had never once visited. That is the loneliness that never quite goes away, isn't it? The loneliness of knowing something is true about your life that no one around you has the language to understand. You felt it but could never put it into words. Let's go deeper, because this is where it gets uncomfortably precise. The thing you walked away from, whether it was a person, a place, a role, a version of yourself, it wasn't just a neutral situation that ran its course. It was something that had begun to pull against the specific direction your life was meant to travel. And at some level, some frequency of awareness that exists below the thinking mind, you registered that tension as a kind of spiritual alarm. Chosen ones are wired differently. You process experience at a depth that most people never reach, not because you are better, but because you carry a different kind of assignment. You were never designed for the shallow end of anything. Not relationships, not work, not purpose, not pain. Everything you touch, you feel fully. Every loss runs deeper. Every connection carries more weight. Every decision costs you more than it seems to cost the people around you. This is why certain situations that other people navigated easily felt almost unbearable to you. Not because you are too sensitive, not because you are broken, but because you were built with a level of spiritual perception that makes the ordinary insufferable. You can sense inauthenticity. You can feel when energy shifts in a room. You can detect when something looks right but registers wrong, when someone's words and intentions are not aligned, when a path seems logical but carries no resonance with who you actually are. This heightened sensitivity, the very thing that made certain environments feel like slow suffocation, is not a liability. It is the navigation system heaven embedded in you so that you would not remain somewhere that would cost you your calling. The situation you walked away from was trying to cost you your calling. Let that settle for a moment. Think about who you were becoming inside of it, not who you presented on the surface, not the version of yourself you constructed for appearances, for stability, for the comfort of people who weren't willing to handle your full truth. Think about who you were becoming in the quiet, in the private moments, in the thoughts that came at 2 a.m. when all your curated defenses had gone to sleep and only the raw truth was still awake. Were you becoming more of yourself or less? Were you expanding into the person you always sensed you were meant to be? Or were you contracting slowly, steadily, almost imperceptibly, shrinking yourself to fit a space that was never built for your actual dimensions? Because this is the most dangerous thing that can happen to a chosen one. Not a dramatic, visible collapse, but a slow spiritual erosion, a gradual dimming, a steady accumulation of small compromises that, one by one, seem entirely reasonable, but together create a version of you that no longer resembles the person heaven designed. You felt this happening. You watched it in real time from somewhere inside yourself, and you did not have the words for it, but you felt it clearly. I am disappearing in here. And the day you walked away was the day you decided that disappearing was not your destiny. Now here is where something shifts. Here is where the reframe arrives that you have been waiting for without knowing you were waiting for it. The people around you, the ones who questioned your decision, who shook their heads, who offered their unsolicited analysis about what you should have done differently, they were operating from a framework that does not apply to your life. Their framework says, success is measured by how long you stayed. Faithfulness is measured by how much you endured. Maturity is measured by your ability to make something work, regardless of what it costs you. That framework was not designed for someone like you. Your framework, the one that governs a life built around genuine purpose and divine assignment, says something different entirely. It says, faithfulness is measured by alignment. It says, maturity is knowing when a season has ended. It says, sometimes the most loyal thing you can do for your calling is refuse to let anything, not comfort, not familiarity, not fear of judgment, keep you in a place that heaven has already released you from. You were not being unfaithful when you walked away. You were being faithful to something most people in your life couldn't see. Here is what you could not have known at the time. The door you walked through when you left was not just an exit. It was an entrance. And the entrance was to a version of your life that was only available to you on the other side of that decision. This is what most people never discover because most people never make the walk. They stay. They endure. They convince themselves that longing for something different is ingratitude, that the life they were settling for was the life they deserved. And so they never find out what was waiting on the other side of the thing that was slowly consuming them. You found out, or you are finding out right now. And what you are finding, and what you will continue to find in the months ahead, is going to be worth every moment of doubt you carried through the transition. There is something heaven does with chosen ones that it cannot do with anyone else. It uses the thing they lost to open the thing they couldn't yet see. You know this pattern. You've lived it before, even if you haven't identified it yet. Think back, not to the most recent loss, but further back. Think about the thing that was taken from you, or the thing you walked away from before this most recent season. The relationship that ended, or the opportunity that collapsed, or the plan that fell apart years before the decision you've been carrying now. Didn't something come after that? Didn't something open? Not immediately. Not without pain, not without a period of confusion and grief and the particular loneliness of starting over. But eventually, didn't something arrive that you would not have been able to receive if the previous thing had remained? This is the pattern. This is how heaven operates in the life of a chosen one. Every release is a repositioning. Every ending is an unlocking. Every door that closes is heaven clearing your hands so you can reach for something you could not have carried alongside the thing you were holding. The door you walked through, or the door you are standing in front of right now, is not the end of your story. It is the beginning of the chapter that your story has been building toward the entire time. Most people will never experience this, because most people will not make the walk. But let's be honest about what the walk actually costs, because this script would be less than truthful if it only spoke to the destination without honoring the difficulty of the road. Walking away is not clean. It is not simple. It is not the triumphant moment that the decision deserves most of the time. It is messy and disorienting and full of a grief that doesn't always have an obvious name. Because even when you leave something that was diminishing you, even when every part of you knows it was the right decision, there is still a loss. There is still the version of the future you had imagined inside that situation, the version where it worked out, where it became what you hoped it could be, where the investment of yourself paid the return you were expecting. You had to grieve that future. You had to release the person you were inside that situation, even if that person was a smaller, quieter, more compressed version of who you actually are. There is still a mourning that comes with that. And if you've been sitting in that mourning, if you've been carrying a guilt or a second guessing that won't quite let go, I need you to hear this very clearly. Your grief is not evidence that you made the wrong decision. Your grief is evidence that you are a person who loved something fully. It is evidence of your depth, your capacity for commitment, your willingness to be all in on something you believed in. And that depth, that capacity, is not being wasted. It is being redirected. Heaven does not let anything that comes from a chosen one's heart go to waste. Every tear you cried over that situation, every night you lay awake replaying what you could have done differently, every morning you woke up and felt the absence of what used to be there, every single one of those moments was being recorded, held, alchemized. The pain you processed was not a detour, it was preparation. Let's talk about what was actually happening to you during the time you were inside the thing you eventually walked away from. You were being trained. Not in the way that word usually sounds, not in a soft, motivational poster way. In the most literal, spiritually precise way. The situation that was costing you was simultaneously developing in you capacities that you could not have developed in a more comfortable environment. Think about what you learned about yourself. Think about the discernment you developed, the ability to read energy, to sense misalignment, to recognize when something looks right but registers wrong. You didn't have that before. Or you had a version of it, but it was theoretical. It lived in your head as an idea, not in your body as a knowing. The situation trained it into your nervous system. Think about the boundaries you learned to recognize, even if you couldn't enforce them yet. Think about the clarity you developed about who you are and who you are not, what you are willing to accept and what you will never accept again. Think about the resilience that was built inside you through the very process of surviving something that had no quick resolution. You came out of that experience knowing things about yourself that you could not have known any other way. You came out with tools, discernment, boundaries, clarity, resilience that are going to be absolutely essential to where your life is going next. Tools that the version of you who entered that situation didn't yet possess. Heaven needed you to have those tools before it could open the next door. This explains something that never made sense. This explains why the timing of your walk felt both too late and exactly right. It was too late in the sense that you wish you had listened to that whisper sooner. but it was exactly right in the sense that you couldn't have left one moment before you did, because you needed everything that came before the departure to equip you for everything that comes after it. You need to understand something about the people who didn't understand your decision. Their confusion was not your assignment to resolve. This is one of the most quietly consuming struggles of a chosen one. The need to be understood by people who were not built to understand you. The need to justify your internal knowing to people who have never operated from internal knowing. The need to translate a spiritual perception into terms that logic can accept. For people whose primary language is logic, you can't. And more importantly, you were never supposed to. The people who questioned your decision, they were not wrong about their own lives. Their framework works for them. Their way of processing and deciding and committing is appropriate for the path they are walking. But their path is not your path. Their calling is not your calling. And the navigation system that guides you was never designed to be legible to everyone observing your life from the outside. The most dangerous thing you can do in this season is allow the noise of their confusion to override the clarity of what you know. Because that clarity, the quiet, unshakable sense that you made the right decision even when you couldn't prove it, that clarity is not arrogance. It is not self-deception. It is the voice of the same intelligence that has been guiding you your entire life, the same intelligence that alerted you before the situation became what it eventually became, the same intelligence you are still learning to trust completely. Trust it, not because it makes you better than the people who don't understand you, but because it is the specific guidance system that was designed for the specific path you are on. And you cannot walk your path using someone else's compass. Here is the major reframe, the one that changes everything. The thing you walked away from, the loss, the grief, the question of what you gave up, was not the primary event of that chapter of your life. You are the primary event. Your growth, your development, your refining, your becoming, that was what the entire chapter was about. The situation was not the main character. The relationship was not the main character. The job, the opportunity, the version of the plan that collapsed, none of it was the main character. You were. And in the story of a chosen one, every experience, including the painful ones, especially the painful ones, is in service of the character's development. Every chapter that ends was ending so that the character could become who they need to be for the chapter that comes next. This means that nothing you went through was lost. Not a single moment, not a single lesson, not a single night of pain, not a single morning of starting over. Not a single prayer you prayed inside that situation hoping for something to shift. None of it was wasted. All of it was investment. All of it was working in the background to produce the version of you who is sitting here right now, older in wisdom, clearer in knowing, more rooted in who you actually are than the version of you who entered that season. You did not lose that chapter. You graduated from it, and graduation is not loss. Graduation is arrival. You arrived at the beginning of what comes next. And what comes next, what is already assembling itself in the unseen dimension of your life, what is already being arranged in the background while you are still processing the decision you made, is going to require exactly who you became inside the chapter you just closed. Everything suddenly makes sense. Let's talk about what walking away actually unlocked. Because this is the part that most people in your position miss, the part that gets buried under the grief and the second guessing, and the exhausting effort of justifying your decision to people who weren't inside your experience. When you released your grip on the thing that was holding you in place, you simultaneously released a version of yourself that had formed around that thing. A version of you that had adapted quietly over time in ways you didn't fully register to the specific demands and limitations and emotional geography of that situation. Chosen ones are highly adaptive. It is one of their most powerful qualities and one of their greatest vulnerabilities simultaneously. When you enter a situation, you adjust. You read the emotional environment. You calibrate your responses. You develop strategies for navigating the specific dynamics in front of you. You become, in a sense, a version of yourself that is tailored for where you are. And sometimes, particularly when the environment you've been adapting to is not aligned with your actual assignment, that tailored version is a significantly reduced version, a quieter version, a version that has learned not to take up the space you were designed to inhabit, a version that has learned not to fully express what it knows, not to fully trust what it senses, not to fully inhabit the scale of who it actually is. When you walked away, that version began to dissolve, and in its place slowly, sometimes uncomfortably, the way a room feels unfamiliar after rearranging the furniture, the original version began to return. The you that exists when no one is asking you to be less than you are. The you that was there before the situation began to shape you. The you that knows things, senses things, carries things that the adapted version had learned to suppress. You are in the process of returning to yourself. And the return is everything. There is a dimension of your walk that is operating beyond what your human perception can fully track. And this matters not because it takes the pain away, but because it reframes what the pain was for. Heaven does not operate on the timeline you are observing from inside your life. From your position, you can see a series of events before the decision itself, the aftermath, the current moment. You can feel the gap between where you are and where you hope to be. You can feel the time that has passed, the things that haven't yet materialized, the unanswered questions that the decision created. From heaven's position, the view is entirely different. From heaven's position, the decision you made was not a moment of uncertainty. It was a moment of alignment. It was the moment a chosen one finally moved in the direction they had been designed to move in, breaking free from the thing that had been anchoring them in place and stepping into the open current of their actual destiny. From heaven's position, everything that is coming toward you was already in motion before you made the decision. The door that is going to open, the connection, the opportunity, the version of your life that is still assembling itself just beyond your current line of sight. It began moving in your direction before you took the first step. Heaven knew you were going to walk away before you did, and it began arranging the next chapter before the current one had finished. This is what divine timing means. Not that things happen when you expect them to, or even when you need them to by your own estimation. It means that what is prepared for you has been prepared with perfect foreknowledge of who you are going to be when it arrives. Heaven is not sending the next thing to the version of you who walked away. It is sending the next thing to the version of you who has been through everything that the walk produced. The more complete version, the more equipped version, the version who can actually receive and steward and expand what is coming. The delay you are experiencing is not rejection, it is calibration. You need to hear something that no one around you is positioned to say. You are closer than you think you are. Not in the way that phrase usually sounds, not as a consolation offered to keep you enduring something indefinitely. Closer in the literal, measurable sense. The gap between where you are right now and where your life is headed has collapsed in ways you cannot yet see from your current vantage point. The walk you made, the decision you are still questioning, the chapter you closed, the version of the future you released, that was the last major clearing. That was the final act of preparation. Not because your life will now be without challenge or refinement, but because the core character work that was required before the next season could open, that work is complete. You went through what you went through. You developed what you developed. You became who the journey required you to become. And the ground you are standing on right now, even if it feels unfamiliar, even if it feels like open space rather than solid foundation, is the ground that your next season is going to be built on. This is not the end. This is not even the middle. This is the beginning of what you were always being prepared for. And the preparation was not wasted. Not one day of it. Here is what I need you to understand about the isolation you've carried through this season. The people who couldn't follow you into this decision, the ones who stepped back when you walked away, the ones who chose the thing over you, the ones who simply couldn't comprehend what you were sensing, their departure was not additional loss. Their departure was part of the unlocking. Because the life you are being released into requires a different kind of company. Not necessarily better people than the ones who fell away, but people who are calibrated to the frequency of where you are going, not where you've been. People who can see what you see, who can carry what you carry, who are themselves operating from that same quiet internal knowing that has guided you your entire life without you always having a name for it. Those people are coming. Some of them are already near. Some of them are in the same transitional space you're in, having made their own version of the walk, carrying their own version of the question you've been sitting with. Chosen ones are drawn to each other. Not immediately, not always obviously, but with a steadiness that doesn't depend on proximity or circumstance. They find each other, and the connections that form on the other side of a season like this one, connections built not on comfort or familiarity or shared history, but on shared depth and shared knowing. Those connections carry a quality that the ones you're grieving were not capable of holding. The loneliness of this transition is real, but it is temporary. And it is not a sign that you made the wrong choice. It is a sign that you are in the space between who you were and who you are becoming, the sacred, uncomfortable, necessary space that exists between every major chapter of a chosen one's life. You have been here before, and every time you've passed through this space, you emerged into something larger than what you left. This time will be no different. Let's talk about your gift. The thing that was suppressed or dimmed or forced underground inside the situation you walked away from, your actual gift. The thing you came into this world to offer, it is still there. Not diminished by what it endured. Not broken by what it cost you to carry it through a season that wasn't built for it. If anything, it has been refined. There is a metallurgical principle that applies perfectly to the life of a chosen one. Certain metals only reach their full strength, their full clarity, their full capacity for brilliance after they have been subjected to intense heat. The heat doesn't weaken the metal. The heat drives out the impurities. The heat reveals the true nature of the material, its actual composition, its actual quality, its actual potential. You have been through heat, and what remains is not a damaged version of your gift. What remains is your gift at its most essential, stripped of the performance, the pretense, the layers of adaptation you built to survive an environment that wasn't your home. What remains is the most authentic, most concentrated, most powerful version of what you carry. That is what is going to be poured into the next season of your life. That is what is going to be made available to the people and the purpose and the places that are waiting for it. Not the adapted version, not the compressed version, not the version that learned to make itself smaller, the full, undiluted, refined version of who you actually are. The world has not yet seen what you are fully capable of when you are operating in alignment with your actual assignment. This is what others could not understand. This is what was being protected inside the chapter you just closed. This is what the walk away made possible. There is one more thing that needs to be said. One more truth that heaven has been holding over you, waiting for the moment you were ready to receive it without flinching. The version of your life you are walking toward is not a consolation prize for the one you released. It is not the runner-up version, the secondary option, the path you settle for because the first one didn't work out. It is not less than what you hoped for. It is more, not in the superficial sense, not necessarily in the ways that are easy to quantify or display or explain to the people in your life who measure things by visible metrics, but in the ways that actually matter in depth, in alignment, in the quiet knowing that what you are building is actually yours, actually resonant with who you are, actually connected to the specific assignment your life was designed to carry. The thing you walked away from was never going to give you that. Not because it was inherently bad, or because the people involved were bad, or because the opportunity wasn't real, but because it wasn't designed for you. It was designed for a version of someone, and you were the closest available approximation. But it was not built to hold your actual dimensions. What is coming was built for your actual dimensions. And when it arrives, when you step into it and it fits without requiring you to compress or adapt or suppress, you are going to understand, at a cellular level, why everything happened the way it happened, why the timing was what it was, why the walk was necessary, why the grief was worth it, why the season of question and transition was not a deviation from your story but the most essential movement within it. You are going to understand that heaven was not absent during the painful part. Heaven was building. And what heaven builds, when it builds for a chosen one who was willing to make the walk that most people would never make, is something that cannot be destroyed by the same forces that once diminished you. Something established on a foundation that matches the scale of what you were always called to carry. Something that fits. Your next chapter fits.
Your season is changing, not eventually, not someday, not after a further period of unspecified waiting. The shift is already in motion. The things that are in the motion toward you are already moving. The ground beneath this transitional moment you are standing in the already forming into the foundation of what comes next. Your preparation was not wasted. Every day of it, every difficult morning, every night of processing what you couldn't resolve, every moment of grief over the thing you released, every prayer you prayed in the gap between where you were and you hadn't yet arrived. None of it was wasted. All of it was investment. All of it is already producing a return that you will be to see clearly and undeniably in the days ahead. Your uniqueness was intentional. The way you process, the way you sense, the way you carry things other can't hold, the way you see dimension of experience that others miss entirely. None of this is accident. None of this is flow. None of this is the thing about you that needs to correct it for an ordinary world. This is your design. This is your equipment for the specific assignment your life was built to carry, and your story is still unfolding. What you are in the middle of right now, the transition, the rebuild, the slow and sometimes disordered return to yourself. This is not the final image. This is not the version of your life that gets to define you. This is the passage. This is the corridor between the chapter, the ended, and the chapter that is being written. And the chapter that is being written, the one that your walk made possible, the one that required everything your endure to unlock the chapter is going to be something you could not have imagined from inside the thing you needed to live. Walk forward, not with certainty about every detail, but with faith in the pattern that has always, without expectation, brought something greater out of every difficult release you ever made. Heaven show what you couldn't. Heaven knew what the decision would cost you and determine you were worth the cost. Heaven cleared the space, closed the door, and opened the corridor specially for the you who was willing to trust the whisper over the noise, the knowing over the fear, the freedom over the familiar. You made the walk. Now receive what is unlocked.